A leather sole cracks against a jawbone, the sound of the dropkick explosion echoing like a gunshot through the trees. The hooded man's head snaps back, his body turning into a ragdoll as he's sent flying into the dirt. Above the ringing in his ears, a blond man screams, his face twisted in disbelief as he yells at the catgirl for her reckless stupidity. You're looking at a man who is about to be branded a monster, and in just a few minutes, he will be standing over a dying hero with a sword through his own lungs. But the path to that tragedy starts right here, with a single, violent mistake. Zordia doesn't just look angry, she looks possessed. Her two-toned hair whips around her face like a storm as she grips her massive scythe, her knuckles white. The sight of her fallen subordinate has snapped something inside her. She doesn't care about the mission anymore, her eyes locked onto the catgirl with a murderous intensity. Screw the quest, she shrieks, the sound echoing through the trees. Just die. She lunges, the blade of her scythe humming as it cuts through the humid air toward her target. The catgirl is a blur of motion, her tail twitching for balance as she leaps into the branches above. She moves with an agility that mocks the heavy swings of the scythe below. The attacks of you lowly humans won't hit me, she taunts, her voice dripping with the arrogance of a beastkin who knows she's faster. She perches on a branch, looking down at Zordia like a predator watching a clumsy insect, completely unaware that she's poking a hornet's nest. The air suddenly grows cold and heavy as Zordia brings her finger to her mouth, biting down until the copper scent of blood fills the air. She smears the red liquid across the blade of her scythe, and the weapon seems to groan in hunger. This is the berserk mode, a terrifying state where the scythe drinks the life force of its master. Zordia's eyes glaze over, losing the light of reason. She no longer sees friends or foes. She only sees things that need to be harvested. With a scream that sounds more like a beast than a woman, Zordia unleashes a massive, destructive slash. The ground itself groans and splits open, a chasm forming where the scythe's energy passes. The catgirl freezes, the sheer scale of the destruction paralyzing her. But before the wave can claim her, the blond man moves. He lunges forward, his hands grasping her small frame and yanking her back, just as the earth beneath her original spot vanishes into dust. They tumble onto the grass, the blond man immediately barking at her to run. But the catgirl is stubborn, her ears flattened against her head as she refuses to leave him. Their bickering is cut short by the sound of heavy footsteps. Zordia is charging again, her scythe trailing behind her like a reaper's tool. The blond man grits his teeth, his fingers beginning to glow with a dark, flickering light. He has no choice. He has to intervene with magic before they're both sliced in half. Ominous chains, he shouts, and black, rusted links of magical energy erupt from the soil, wrapping around Zordia's limbs. For a heartbeat, she's pinned. But her strength in this berserk state is monstrous. With a guttural roar of "dee," she flexes her muscles, and the magical chains shatter into 1,000 black shards. She doesn't slow down, her momentum carrying her forward like an unstoppable juggernaut of steel and rage. Suddenly, the forest is filled with a blinding flash and a deafening roar. A massive explosion erupts right in Zordia's path, the concussive force blasting her backward and sending her scythe spinning into the undergrowth. The blond man shields his eyes, coughing as the smoke clears. He looks around, his heart hammering against his ribs. That wasn't his magic. Someone else is here, watching from the shadows, and they just saved his life with a single, devastating blast. The hooded man who was drop-kicked earlier staggers to his feet, wiping blood from his lip. He looks at the duo, his expression grim. "Hurry up and leave," he rasps, his voice strained. He explains that Zordia has lost her mind. She's a threat to everyone now, even the princess they were supposed to protect. He's going to stay behind and buy them time, a sacrificial lamb against the whirlwind of Zordia's madness. He knows he might not survive, but he's chosen his path. The blond man pauses, looking at the hooded figure with a newfound respect. "Thank you," he calls out, a rare moment of sincerity breaking through his cold exterior. The hooded man offers a small, tired smile in return. "I hope you can meet that friend of yours," he replies. It's a parting wish, a flicker of humanity in the middle of a battlefield. The blond man turns and grabs the catgirl, pulling her away before the hooded man can change his mind or Zordia can recover. As they trek through the deepening shadows of the forest, the cat girl's ears droop, and she mutters a quiet, muffled apology. The blonde man doesn't look back, but his voice is steady. He tells her that she's young, and she's ignorant, and because of that, she's going to make countless mistakes. It's not a scolding, it's a cold, hard truth about growing up. He's seen enough of the world to know that every scar starts with a moment of foolishness. His lecture continues, his words rhythmic like a march. He tells her that falling down isn't the end, it's the getting back up that actually matters. In this world, as long as your heart is beating and your lungs are drawing air, everything can be managed. He speaks with the weight of someone who has died and come back, someone who understands that life is a series of failures that you simply have to outlast. The cat girl listens, her eyes wide, absorbing the philosophy of a villain. The blonde man stops for a split second, a frown creasing his brow. That hooded man's voice, it had a cadence, a familiar ring that tugged at the back of his memory. He tries to place it, searching through the mental files of his past life and this new one, but nothing fits. He shakes his head, dismissing the thought as a trick of the adrenaline. It was probably just his imagination, he tells himself, but the feeling of unease lingers like a cold draft on the back of his neck. They continue their journey through the dense, tangled undergrowth. The forest seems to press in on them, the silence only broken by the snap of twigs under their boots and the distant, haunting calls of birds. The tension from the fight begins to drain away, replaced by the heavy, rhythmic exhaustion of a long march. They don't speak, each lost in their own thoughts as the sun begins to dip lower in the sky, casting long, distorted shadows across the forest floor. The trees finally thin out, giving way to a clearing bathed in the golden, honeyed light of the setting sun. The blond man pauses at the edge of the ridge, his breath hitching slightly as he looks down at a small, modest building nestled among waves of colorful wildflowers. So this is the Hill of Flowers, he murmurs. It's a peaceful sight, a stark contrast to the violence they just escaped. It looks like a place where time stands still, far removed from the politics and wars of the kingdom. In the center of the clearing, they see a girl with short hair, her cloak fluttering in the breeze as she grips a wooden staff. She's focused, her eyes narrowed as she chants, aiming her magic at a training target. She doesn't see them yet, her entire world narrowed down to the flow of mana in her veins. She's practicing with a diligence that speaks of a desperate need to get stronger, her movements repetitive and disciplined in the quiet afternoon air. Rydia can't contain herself any longer. She bursts from the tree line, shouting Rachel's name as she sprints across the field. The two girls collide in a joyful, messy hug, laughing and crying all at once. It's a reunion of pure, unfiltered emotion. Standing back, Lobelia watches them, his arms crossed over his chest. He stays in the shadows of the trees, a dark silhouette against the bright flowers, feeling like an intruder in such a wholesome, happy moment. Rachel pulls back, her eyes bright as she notices the stranger standing with Rydia. She introduces herself with a polite bow and then, with the innocent curiosity of a student, asks the unnamed Lobelia if he could demonstrate some magic. She has no idea she's talking to one of the most powerful and feared magicians in the realm. Lobelia just stares at her, his expression unreadable. To her, he's just a traveling companion. To the rest of the world, he's a nightmare in human form. The door to the nearby house creaks open, and a man in spectacles steps out into the light. The moment his eyes land on Lobelia, his face goes pale, and he nearly drops the tray he's carrying. He recognizes that face, those eyes. He's a man who has lived his life in the shadows of the great, and he knows that if Lobelia's identity is revealed here, his own peaceful life will be over in an instant. He adjusts his glasses, his hands trembling slightly as he tries to maintain his composure. Despite his fear, the man in glasses is a scholar at heart. His eyes drift to the book hanging at Lobelia's hip, the legendary, sentient spellbook that most mages would kill to even see. He becomes instantly starstruck, his fear replaced by a desperate, fanatical hunger for knowledge. He practically begs to hold it, his voice shaking with excitement. Lobelia, seeing the pathetic but genuine passion in the man's eyes, sighs and allows it. watching as the scholar cradles the book like it's a holy relic. The tension breaks as the group moves inside the small house. It's cozy, smelling of dried herbs and wood smoke. The man in glasses proves to be a surprisingly hospitable host, laying out a spread of tea and homemade cookies. They sit around a wooden table, the atmosphere shifting from a battlefield to a quiet tea party. Lobelia sits stiffly, the domesticity of the scene feeling foreign to him. He's more used to dark dungeons and blood-soaked fields than the warmth of a hearth. The host tries to open the spellbook, his fingers fumbling with the latch, but the book remains stubbornly shut, its sentient nature refusing to let a stranger peer into its secrets. Rydia ignores the struggle, turning to the host to thank him for looking after Rachel. The man in glasses just chuckles, shaking his head. He claims that Rachel is actually the one helping him, her presence bringing life and order to his cluttered, lonely existence as a researcher. Rydia reaches into her pack and pulls out a small vial of tribal medicine, a potent remedy meant to treat the host's chronic magical depletion. It's a thoughtful gift, and it leads to a moment of light-hearted teasing as they call him a hopeless master who can't even take care of his own health. The room is filled with genuine laughter, a sound that seems to baffle Lobelia. He watches them interact, wondering how they can be so carefree in such a dangerous world. Lobelia finally stands, his shadow stretching across the tea-stained table. He insists that they need to leave. He doesn't want to draw the heat of their pursuers onto this peaceful home. He's a magnet for trouble, and he knows it. But as he turns to go, the host reaches out and stops him. He doesn't want them to leave empty-handed. He insists on giving them a parting gift, a token of his appreciation for everything they've done for Rachel and the medicine they brought. There's a brief, awkward misunderstanding as the host produces a ring, and for a second, it looks like a proposal, leading to a flurry of embarrassed denials. But the ring is no ordinary piece of jewelry. It's a magic ring, imbued with powerful defensive properties. Lobelia accepts it, sliding the cold metal onto his finger. It's a gesture of gratitude for Rydia's return, a physical bond between the scholar and the travelers who are about to head back into the storm. Rachel and her master stand at the edge of the clearing, waving until their arms must ache as Lobelia and Rydia disappear back into the tree line. The sun has finally set, and the first stars are beginning to prick through the velvet sky. The journey is far from over, but for a few hours, they found a sanctuary. Now, the quiet of the forest returns, but this time it feels less like a threat and more like a path forward. As they walk, the rhythm of their footsteps becomes the only sound. Lobelia finds himself reflecting on the day. He hadn't expected to have fun. He hadn't expected to share tea with strangers. It was a detour from his cold, calculated plans, a reminder that the world isn't just made of enemies and targets. He glances at Rydia, her tail swishing contentedly, and decides that it's finally time to stop hiding. He has a secret to reveal, one that will change how she sees him forever. He stops in his tracks, the moonlight catching the sharp lines of his face. "My name is Lobelia," he says, the words heavy in the air. Lobelia Crowley. He waits for the reaction, for the fear or the disgust that usually follows that name. It's the name of a villain, a man whispered about in hushed tones by those who fear the dark arts. He watches Rydia, expecting her to recoil, to see him as the monster the stories describe. Rydia's eyes go wide, her jaw dropping as she processes the name. She's heard the legends of the famous and horrible magician who supposedly kills without mercy. But then, she looks at him, the man who saved her, who lectured her on getting back up, and who shared tea with her friends. "You're actually kind," she says, her voice soft and full of genuine surprise. The compliment hits Lobelia like a physical blow, his composure momentarily crumbling as he looks away, his ears turning a faint shade of red. But the moment of peace is shattered. Suddenly, the bushes rustle violently, and they are surrounded. A hostile group of humans and beastmen emerge from the dark, their weapons drawn and faces twisted in anger. They aren't bandits. They look like soldiers, and they are shouting for their princess. They've found Rydia, and they clearly believe that Lobelia is the one who took her against her will. The atmosphere turns toxic in an instant, the air thick with the promise of violence. Lobelia doesn't move, his hands staying visible as he looks at the surrounding circle. He remains eerily calm, turning to Rydia and quietly encouraging her to return to her tribe. He's trying to play the long game, hoping that if she goes willingly, he can resolve this without a bloodbath. He's planned for many things, and he hopes his reputation as a villain can be used as a shield rather than a target for once. But humans are rarely that rational when they're afraid. One of the men, a soldier with a scarred face, steps forward, his hand shaking as he points a gun at Lobelia. He accuses Lobelia of using dark magic to bewitch the princess and harm his comrades. Lobelia tries to deny it, his voice level and cold, but the man isn't listening. He sees the black robe, the sinister book, and the villain of the stories. To him, Lobelia's very existence is a crime. He pulls the trigger, the roar of the gunshot echoing through the night. The bullet finds its mark. Lobelia grunts, the impact slamming into him and forcing him down to his knees. Blood begins to soak into his dark clothes, a deep, spreading stain. Rydia screams his name, her voice full of despair as she tries to rush to his side, but she's held back by the soldiers. The villain has been brought low, not by a hero, but by a panicked man with a weapon. Lobelia looks down at the dirt, his breath coming in ragged gasps as the world begins to tilt. Next thing he knows, Lobelia is staring at the cold, damp stone of a prison floor. The cell is reinforced with magic-absorbing bars that hum with a faint, blue light, draining his strength every time he breathes. He realizes he's in a game-over situation. In the story of this world, the hero Reinhard considers him a primary enemy. Being captured like this means a trial and an execution, with no one to speak for the man everyone wants to see dead. He's truly alone. A soft clatter at the bars makes him look up. A girl named Liane is standing there, her movements clumsy and hesitant as she peers into the gloom of the cell. Lobelia is genuinely surprised to see her. She's someone he helped in the past, a minor character he barely thought of again. But Liane is overjoyed that he remembers her. She's the only one who doesn't look at him with hatred, her eyes full of a strange, flickering hope that he hasn't seen in a long time. Liane whispers through the bars, telling him she believes in his innocence. She saw what he did, how he saved her when no one else would. She wants to help, to go to the knights and persuade them that they've made a mistake. But Lobelia cuts her off, his voice cold and brittle. He tells her there is no need for her to waste her breath. He knows how the world works. The word of a girl like her won't stand against the conviction of a kingdom that needs a monster to blame. Despite his coldness, Liane doesn't flinch. She grips the bars, her knuckles white. She asserts her royal authority, reminding him that she isn't just a commoner he can dismiss. She vows to repay the favor she owes him, no matter what it takes. It's a moment of fierce, unexpected loyalty that catches Lobelia off guard. He's spent so long being the villain that he's forgotten what it's like to have someone actually fight for him, especially someone so seemingly fragile. The sound of heavy boots echoes in the corridor as a knight named Yugal approaches. He's come to check on the prisoner and is shocked to find the princess at the cell. Thinking fast, Liane creates a wild distraction. She throws her arms out and loudly proclaims that she has deep feelings for Lobelia, her face flushing crimson as she makes the outrageous claim. Lobelia's jaw drops in the shadows of his cell, his brain stalling at the sheer absurdity of the lie. Meanwhile, at the royal infirmary, the mood is somber. Reinhard, the golden-haired hero of justice, walks among the beds of his injured comrades, laying bunches of flowers on their nightstands. He looks every bit the savior, his presence bringing comfort to the wounded. Alicia, the main heroine, watches him from the doorway, her expression conflicted. She's seen the reports, and she's heard the accusations, but she can't help but feel that something about the situation with Lobelia doesn't add up. Reinhard notices her hesitation and immediately dismisses her doubts. To him, the world is binary, black and white, good and evil. He points out that Lobelia is the only dark magic user in the vicinity, and therefore, he must be the culprit. It's a simple, circular logic that leaves no room for nuance. He's convinced himself that by punishing Lobelia, he is protecting the peace, unaware that his justice is built on a foundation of assumptions and half-truths. Reinhard's jaw sets in a hard line as he vows to beat Lobelia personally, promising that the dark mage will never touch his friends again. He walks out of the room, his cape swirling behind him, the very image of righteous fury. But as the door clicks shut, The camera lingers on one of the unconscious men in the beds. His hand twitches, a small, involuntary spasm that hints at a consciousness trapped beneath the surface. A witness who could change everything if only they could speak. The day of the judgment arrives. Lobelia is led out of his cell, his hands bound by heavy, glowing shackles. He's escorted by a wall of armed guards into a massive, open-air arena. The stands are packed with spectators, their faces a blur of angry eyes and shouting mouths. High above, a witch watches from a balcony, her gaze sharp and calculating. They've turned his trial into a spectacle, a public execution disguised as a duel for the entertainment of the masses. Reinhard is already there, standing in the center of the dusty arena with his holy sword drawn. He challenges Lobelia to a fair duel, claiming that he will pass judgment with his own hands. Lobelia looks at him, a weary sigh escaping his lips. He had hoped they could talk, that he could explain the truth about Zordia and the real events in the forest. But looking at Reinhard's face, he sees only the blind certainty of a hero who has already decided the ending of the story. Reinhard ignores Lobelia's attempts to speak, his voice booming across the arena as he claims they have all the evidence they need. "I'll never forgive you," he declares, the words final and cold. He raises his sword, the blade glowing with a pure, white light that seems to push back the shadows. To the crowd, he is the light fighting the darkness. To Lobelia, he is just another person who refuses to listen, another barrier between him and the quiet life he wanted. Realizing that words are useless and a duel is inevitable, Lobelia's demeanor shifts. He stops playing the victim. With a sudden, violent flex of his mana, he shatters the magic-absorbing shackles, the metal fragments flying through the air like shrapnel. The guards jump back in alarm, and the crowd gasps. Lobelia stands tall, his dark eyes fixed on Reinhard. If the hero wants a fight, Lobelia will give him one that he'll never forget. He prepares his magic, the air around him beginning to hum with power. The duel officially commences with the sharp ring of a bell. Reinhard doesn't hesitate. He charges across the arena, his boots kicking up clouds of dust as he closes the distance in a heartbeat. He's a blur of white and gold, his holy sword raised for a finishing strike. Lobelia remains perfectly still, his feet planted firmly on the ground, his expression composed and clinical. He's not a warrior, he's a mage, and he's already calculating the trajectory of Reinhard's attack. Reinhard unleashes a flurry of sword strikes, the blade whistling through the air with lethal precision. But Lobelia parries them effortlessly, using small, concentrated bursts of kinetic magic to deflect the heavy steel. He moves with a minimalist grace that infuriates Reinhard. "You are not a worthy match," Lobelia says, his voice flat and unimpressed. He's not just fighting, he's critiquing, showing the hero that raw justice is no match for refined, dark expertise. Lobelia snaps his fingers, and ominous chains erupt from the ground once more, wrapping around Reinhard's ankles and pulling him off balance. While the hero struggles, Lobelia finally reveals the truth, his voice carrying over the din of the arena. He tells him about Zordia, about her berserk state, and how she was the one who caused the tragedy in the forest. It's the truth, laid bare, but in the heat of battle, the truth often sounds like a desperate lie. Reinhard lets out a roar of frustration, his holy sword erupting in a pillar of white light that shatters the chains once and for all. He refuses to believe Lobelia's convenient story. All he knows is that his friends are lying in hospital beds and Lobelia is a dark mage. To him, the facts are secondary to his feelings of betrayal. He charges again, his strikes becoming faster and more desperate, driven by a righteous anger that blinds him to everything but the villain in front of him. This time, Reinhard's blade finds a gap. He lunges forward, the tip of the holy sword slashing across Lobelia's shoulder. Blood sprays onto the sand, and Lobelia winces, acknowledging the true power of the holy weapon. It burns like fire, a holy energy that actively fights against his dark mana. Reinhard stands back for a moment, his chest heaving. "Don't underestimate me," he warns, his eyes glowing with the intensity of his conviction. As the battle rages on, a sense of profound weariness settles over Lobelia. He looks at Reinhard, the protagonist of this world, a man full of justice and light. and wonders why he refuses to believe. Why is the hero's heart so closed to the possibility of a mistake? Is justice truly blind, or is it just stubborn? He's tried to be the better man, to explain, to de-escalate, but it feels like the universe itself is conspiring to keep them at odds. Lobelia's frustration boils over into a cold, sharp anger. He questions Reinhard aloud, asking if the refusal to listen is simply because he is Lobelia, the man the world decided was a villain before he ever did anything wrong. Is the role of the villain something he can never escape, no matter how many people he saves? He realizes then that the hero doesn't hate him for his actions. He hates him for his existence. And that is an insult Lobelia will no longer tolerate. He decides to stop holding back. If the world wants a villain, he will show them exactly what a true dark mage can do. He reaches out and catches his floating grimoire, the pages flipping at a dizzying speed. He will prove his point through sheer, overwhelming strength. Reinhard's party watches from the sidelines, their faces pale as they feel the sudden, massive spike in Lobelia's mana. The air in the arena begins to crackle with dark electricity as the real fight begins. Lobelia casts Black Circle, a field of draining energy that spreads across the arena floor, making Reinhard's movements sluggish and heavy. He follows it up immediately with Jet Black Spear, summoning a dozen lances of solid shadow that rain down from the sky. Reinhard is forced onto the defensive, swinging his holy sword in a desperate arc to intercept the spears, the impact of each one sending a shockwave through his arms. The villain is finally showing his teeth. Reinhard is struggling, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he fights through the pressure of the dark magic. He's so focused on the spears that he doesn't see Lobelia move. With a burst of speed, Lobelia closes the gap, his boot connecting with Reinhard's chest in a powerful kick. The hero is sent flying, crashing through a stone wall at the edge of the arena in a cloud of rubble and dust. The crowd falls into a stunned, terrifying silence. Seeing their leader down, Reinhard's companions can't stay on the sidelines any longer. They rush into the arena, weapons drawn, accusing Lobelia of trying to commit murder. But Lobelia doesn't even look at them. He waves a hand dismissively, his voice dripping with contempt as he tells the small fry to step back. He isn't interested in them. This is a matter between him and the man who calls himself a hero. The sheer arrogance in his voice is enough to make them hesitate. Reinhard staggers out of the rubble, coughing and covered in dust, but he stops his friends from interfering. He's a man of pride, and he insists on finishing this duel alone. He believes that to protect them and to prove his own strength, he must be the one to bring Lobelia down. He looks at his shaking hands, then grips his sword tighter, his eyes narrowing. He's not done yet. A hero's greatest strength is supposed to be the ability to rise when all seems lost. Reinhard challenges Lobelia to continue, his voice raspy but determined. Lobelia remains composed, his dark mana swirling around him like a cloak. He prepares his next magical attack, his fingers dancing through the air as he weaves a complex spell. He's giving Reinhard one last chance to yield, one last chance to walk away, but he knows the hero won't take it. The tragedy of their conflict is that neither can afford to lose their conviction. Another volley of dark spears launches, and Reinhard dodges them with a desperate, frantic energy. He's pushing his body to the limit, his holy sword glowing brighter and brighter as it reacts to his spirit. During a brief opening, he manages to lunge forward, landing another shallow cut on Lobelia's arm. It's a minor wound, but it proves that the hero is still in the fight, still capable of drawing blood from the monster he's hunting. Reinhard unleashes a fire-based spirit breath attack, a wave of purifying flame that sweeps across the arena. Lobelia shields himself with a barrier, but he notes with a grim amusement that Reinhard is actually growing stronger in the middle of the fight. He wonders if this is the plot armor people talk about, the way a hero always finds a second wind when their back is against the wall. It would be inspiring if it weren't so incredibly annoying to deal with. During a lull in the action, Reinhard accuses Lobelia of kidnapping Princess Rydia, his voice full of righteous indignation. Lobelia tries once more to explain. He was acting as her guard, protecting her while she met a dear friend. He describes the hill of flowers, the tea, the peaceful afternoon. But Reinhard just shakes his head, his face a mask of disbelief. To him, the idea of a dark mage doing something kind is a lie so blatant it's an insult to his intelligence. Lobelia snaps. He strikes Reinhard with a burst of kinetic energy, shouting that the hero is a man who discards people and their perspectives without ever bothering to listen. He's tired of being judged by someone who thinks they have a monopoly on morality. He tells Reinhard that his justice is nothing more than a convenient excuse to ignore anything that doesn't fit into his narrow worldview. The strike sends Reinhard stumbling back, his spirit shaken by the raw truth in Lobelia's voice. Lobelia pins a bleeding and exhausted Reinhard to the ground with a wave of gravity magic. He looks down at the hero, his own face bloodied and pale. He questions the inherent righteousness of being a hero of justice and the crushing unfairness of being hated just for the magic he was born with. Why does Reinhard get the cheers while Lobelia only gets the chains? It's a fundamental question of their world, one that Reinhard has no answer for as he lies in the dirt. A montage of flashes through Lobelia's mind. Years of rejection, the cold glares of villagers, the isolation of his tower. It contrasts sharply with Reinhard's life, the supportive bonds with his friends, the warmth of the palace. It highlights the true loneliness of Lobelia. He's a man who has always been on the outside looking in, a spectator to the happiness of others, condemned to play the part of the antagonist in a play he never asked to join. Lobelia holds the battered Reinhard, his voice dropping to a whisper that only the hero can hear. He expresses a simple, heartbreaking desire. He just wants to live a happy life. He wants to be recognized for who he is, not what people fear he might be. I have the right to make someone happy too, he says, the words thick with an emotion he's tried so hard to bury. It's the most human thing the hero has ever heard from the monster. Reinhard is genuinely confused. He looks up at Lobelia, seeing the tears welling in the mage's eyes for the first time. Why are you crying? He asks, his voice small. He can't reconcile the weeping man in front of him with the demonic villain he's been hunting. Lobelia doesn't answer. He just clenches his bloodied fist in frustration, his body shaking with the effort of holding back years of repressed pain. The arena is silent, the spectators watching the villain break down in real time. Reinhard finds himself unable to move, his body failing him. But as Lobelia prepares a final, mercy-giving strike, Reinhard's survival instinct, or perhaps the world's need for a hero, kicks in. In a final, desperate surge of strength, he drives his holy sword forward. The blade pierces through Lobelia's torso with a sickening squelch. The light of the sword flares one last time, a blinding white flash that signifies the end of the struggle. The villain has been struck down at last. Lobelia coughs up a large amount of blood, the red liquid splashing onto the white hilt of the sword. He looks down at the blade protruding from his chest, his eyes wide and fading. The pain is immense, a cold void spreading from the wound. Reinhard stands over him, his face a mask of grim duty. It's over, he declares. He thinks he's won, that he's finally ended the threat, but the look in Lobelia's eyes isn't one of defeat. It's one of profound, final disappointment. Just as Reinhard is about to pull the sword out to deliver a finishing blow, a figure blurs across the arena. Alicia intervenes, throwing herself between the two men. She rushes to Lobelia's side, her voice a piercing scream of "Stop it!" She shields the dying mage with her own body, her eyes burning with a sudden, fierce protectiveness. She's seen enough, heard enough, and she won't let this senseless violence continue for a second longer. The scene pauses on a transition page, the white space filled with a stark, red warning sign. It reads Akuyaku spoiler in next page. It's a moment of narrative tension, a breath before the world of the story is turned upside down. The viewer is left hanging on the edge of a revelation that will change everything they thought they knew about the characters and the roles they were supposed to play. Alicia, the main heroine whose destiny was always tied to the hero, is now the only thing protecting the kneeling Lobelia. She looks up at Reinhard with a defiance that shocks him to his core. Behind her, Sieg and Lien arrive on the scene, their faces set in grim determination. They aren't there to congratulate the hero. They're there to support the man he just tried to kill. The lines of the story have been blurred, the hero suddenly finding himself on the outside. Sieg steps forward, placing a hand on Reinhardt's shoulder. "The fight is over," he says, his voice heavy with a truth Reinhardt isn't ready to hear. "It is our loss." Reinhardt is stunned, his brain refusing to process the words. He argues desperately, claiming he was close to avenging his comrades, close to finishing the job. He can't understand why his own allies are turning against him at the moment of his victory. He's a hero who has lost his audience. Sieg reveals the crushing truth. Lobelia's claims were true all along. He didn't kidnap the princess, and he wasn't the one who hurt Jake. The investigations have finally caught up with the reality of the situation. Reinhardt desperately tries to argue, his voice cracking as he calls Lobelia an arrogant magician who must have used a trick. He's clinging to his version of the story like a drowning man to a lead weight, unable to let go of the idea that he was right. As Lobelia sinks into despair, convinced that he will never be acknowledged and that he's destined for a bad ending, a voice cuts through the darkness of his thoughts. It's Lien. She speaks up, her voice clear and steady as she contradicts his dark internal monologue. "He saved us," she says. It's a simple statement of fact, but to Lobelia, it sounds like a miracle. For the first time in his life, someone is telling the world that he is a savior, not a monster. Lien doesn't stop there. She declares Lobelia her savior for liberating her hometown, her words carrying the weight of her royal status. Sieg adds his own trust, and suddenly, the royal guards arrive, not to arrest Lobelia, but to form a protective circle around their benefactor. The villain is suddenly the most protected person in the arena. The shift is so total and so sudden that it leaves the spectators in a state of confused silence, their anger replaced by a growing sense of shame. Alicia explains that Jake, the injured man in the infirmary, finally woke up and confirmed everything. Lobelia helped Princess Rydia and saved them from the real threat. But Reinhardt is too far gone. He refuses to believe it, his face contorting as he screams, "An evil would never help anyone." It's a pathetic, desperate cry, the sound of a man whose entire identity is based on a lie he can no longer sustain. He looks at his holy sword, and for the first time, it looks like a weapon of murder. Elisha's voice is cold as she reprimands Reinhardt for his baseless violence. She tells him to admit we're in the wrong. She points out that the people he claimed to be avenging never asked for this vengeance. They just wanted to be safe, and it was Lobelia who actually provided that safety. She's tearing down the hero's facade bit by bit, showing him that his justice was nothing more than an ego trip that nearly cost an innocent man his life. Overwhelmed by the weight of the truth and the horror of his own actions, Reinhardt's strength finally leaves him. He drops his holy sword, the blade clattering hollowly against the stones of the arena. He falls to his knees, his head bowed in total, crushing defeat before his companions. He is a hero who has realized he was the villain of someone else's story, and the realization is a wound deeper than any Lobelia could have inflicted with magic. Alicia ignores the fallen hero, her focus entirely on the man dying in her arms. She desperately channels her healing magic into Lobelia, her hands glowing with a soft, green light. She grips his cold hand, her tears falling onto his pale face as she pleads with him. "Please, don't die," she whispers. She's the main heroine of the world, and she's pouring every ounce of her life force into saving the man the script said she was supposed to hate. Lobelia feels the warmth of her magic, a faint light in the encroaching darkness. He realizes, with a sudden, sharp clarity, that he doesn't want a bad ending. Not now. Not when people have finally seen him for who he is. Not when there's a chance for the happiness he dreamed of. Elisha's magic intensifies, becoming a blinding radiance that fills the entire arena. She commands him to live. And for the first time, Lobelia finds the strength to fight back against the void. Suddenly, the light becomes too bright to bear. A massive surge of energy erupts from the magic ring on Lobelia's finger, reacting to Elisha's overwhelming mana. It creates a blinding flash that envelopes both of them, a pillar of light that stretches into the sky. When the light finally fades and the smoke clears, the center of the arena is empty. Alicia and Lobelia have vanished, leaving their shocked companions to cry out into the silence. They've disappeared. Alicia wakes up with a start, her breath hitching in the cold, damp air. She's alone in a dark, cavernous space, the only light coming from a distant, flickering glow. She remembers the light in the arena, the feeling of being pulled through space. She shivers, realizing she's wearing a robe that isn't hers, it's Lobelia's. She hears the low moan of the wind and decides she has to find an exit and, more importantly, the owner of the robe who was bleeding out just moments ago. As she stumbles through the shadows, a figure suddenly looms out of the darkness. It's Lobelia. He's covered in blood, his clothes tattered, and he's carrying a bundle of firewood like it's just another Tuesday. Alicia lets out a scream of pure terror, her nerves already frayed to the breaking point. He looks at her with a raised eyebrow, his voice as dry and sarcastic as ever as he asks, "Where are you going?" After Alicia's initial fright subsides into a series of indignant huffs, Lobelia can't help but tease her. He tells her she looked so scared he thought she might have wet herself. She pouts, her face turning red as she demands to know why he's still covered in blood if he's walking around and carrying wood. It's a return to their usual dynamic, a small island of normalcy in the middle of a very strange and dangerous situation. Lobelia sits by a small fire, explaining that the ring he received from the hopeless master had 2 emergency spells stored inside, a powerful heal and a random teleportation. The heal saved his life, and the teleportation dumped them, well, somewhere else. He also mentions that he was just clearing out a nest of goblins that were lurking in the cave. They have to wait for the massive storm raging outside to pass before they can even think about moving. He walks to the entrance of the cave and looks out. His heart sinks. Outside, the sky is a bruised purple, and massive, swirling tornadoes are tearing across a desolate, red landscape. He realizes they haven't just been moved across the kingdom. They've been transported to the demon continent. It's a barren, lethal land known for its abnormal weather and monsters that are far beyond anything found in the human realms. They are effectively stranded in hell. That night, as Alicia drifts into an uneasy sleep, Lobelia hears her mumbling Reinhardt's name. A pang of bitterness hits him, but he pushes it down. He knows how this looks, the villain kidnapping the heroine again. If he doesn't get her back safely, his reputation will be cemented in stone forever. He looks out at the harsh, unforgiving horizon of the demon continent, realizing that survival here is going to be a full-time job for both of them. He resolves to ensure Alicia's safe return. It's a new mission, one born of necessity and a lingering sense of duty. If he can bring the world's most important girl back unharmed, maybe, just maybe, he can finally clear his name. Alicia wakes up a few hours later, looking confused and disoriented, her eyes searching the cave until they land on Lobelia. He just nods at her, his expression unreadable in the dying light of the fire. The next day, the pair begins their trek across the sun-scorched desert. The heat is oppressive, a physical weight that drains the moisture from their bodies with every step. Lobelia complains incessantly about the weather, his voice a low grumble of discontent. He checks their supplies and notes with a grimace that they've just used their very last heat resistance potion. From here on out, they are at the mercy of the elements. Alicia, trying to bridge the gap between them, asks Lobelia why he was always at odds with Reinhardt. He dismisses the question with a wave of his hand, but privately, he acknowledges the irony. His original character in the game was designed to be a rival, a man whose competitive nature and dark magic made him an easy target for suspicion. To Alicia, he's a puzzle with half the pieces missing, a man who acts like a villain but bleeds like a human. The sand ahead of them suddenly erupts. 2 giant scorpions, their shells the color of dried blood and their stingers dripping with venom, burst from their burrows. Alicia gasps, her hand flying to her staff, but Lobelia just sighs. He tells her not to make a fuss, his voice calm and bored. He instructs her to use her fire magic, treating the life-or-death encounter like a simple classroom exercise. He's seen these monsters before in the game, and he knows exactly how to break them. The battle is short and brutal. Lobelia weaves through the scorpion strikes with a practiced ease, his dark magic lashing out like whips to crack their carapaces. Alicia follows his lead, casting fireballs that bloom against the monster's shells, incinerating them from the inside out. They work with a surprising, unspoken synergy, the dark and the light magic blending together to turn the giant predators into nothing more than scorched husks in the sand. But the victory is short-lived. The combination of the heat and the intense magical exertion is too much for Alicia. Her knees buckle, and she begins to collapse into the sand. Lobelia calls her useless under his breath, but his actions betray his words. He moves instantly, catching her in a princess carry before she can hit the ground. He doesn't stop, his boots crunching over the sand as he keeps them moving toward whatever shade they can find. Alicia protests feebly, her face flushed with heat and embarrassment. She tells him it's inappropriate for a man of his reputation to carry her like this. Lobelia doesn't even look at her, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He tells her bluntly that he hates women who are a burden. It's a harsh thing to say, and it makes her sob quietly into his shoulder. He hears it and feels a twinge of guilt, reflecting on her devotion to Reinhard and how different her life was supposed to be. That night, huddled around another small campfire, Alicia asks the question that's been burning in her mind. Why didn't he just leave her behind? The teleportation was an accident, and he clearly finds her troublesome. Lobelia stares into the flames for a long time before answering. He claims he did it to prevent Reinhard from becoming a murderer. It's a villainous excuse, a way to frame his kindness as a tactical decision, but Alicia isn't sure she believes him. Alicia launches into a passionate defense of Reinhard's kindness, describing the hero as a man who only wants to do what's right. Lobelia listens in silence, his expression unreadable. He concludes that while Alicia is undoubtedly a good person, her only real flaw is being too blind to Reinhard. She sees the light the hero projects, but she doesn't see the shadows it creates. The people like Lobelia who get stepped on in the pursuit of justice. Lobelia looks her in the eye and tells her, with a surprising lack of sarcasm, that he won't let her die. Privately, he notes that her survival is crucial, not just for her, but for the world. In the game's lore, her happiness with Reinhard is what keeps the world from falling into chaos. If she dies here, he's stuck in a bad spot with no way out. He's protecting his future as much as he's protecting her, or at least that's what he tells himself. The narration reveals a hidden truth. Alicia isn't just a girl. She was a powerful being sealed away for a millennium before Reinhard freed her. Her internal power is so immense that its loss or instability could literally lead to the world's destruction. She is a walking, talking magical nuke, and she has no idea. Lobelia, with his meta-knowledge of the game, is the only person in this world who understands exactly how high the stakes really are. He resolves to protect her from anyone who would try to misuse that power, determined to avoid the bad ending at all costs. After his solemn vow, he decides he's earned a nap. He curls up by the fire, leaving a bewildered Alicia to watch over him. It's a strange role reversal. The powerful mage sleeping soundly while the heroine keeps watch in a monster-infested desert. She watches the rise and fall of his chest, her suspicion of his motives warring with her gratitude. But Alicia's suspicion wins out. She can't help but wonder if he's just waiting for her to let her guard down. In the middle of the night, she quietly slips away from the fire, heading out into the desert. She doesn't have a plan. She just knows she needs to get away from the villain. But the demon continent is full of traps. Suddenly, the sand beneath her feet gives way, and with a sharp scream, she falls through the ground into a dark, bottomless pit. She lands with a heavy thud on a stone floor, the air knocked out of her. As she gasps for breath, she realizes she's in an underground corridor, a labyrinth. She looks up and sees a tiny, unreachable hole in the ceiling, the moonlight from the desert above looking like a distant star. She's trapped in the dark, surrounded by the smell of ancient dust and something much, much worse. Her panic begins to rise, the silence of the ruins pressing in on her. Despondent and alone, Alicia breaks down. She weeps over her own helplessness, her tears splashing onto the cold stone. She tearfully apologizes to Reinhard in her head for the terrible things she said to him back at the arena. She feels like she's being punished for her doubt, forever thinking that the villain might be anything other than a monster. She's a heroine who has lost her way, both literally and figuratively, in the bowels of the earth. A loud, ominous sound echoes through the stone corridor, a wet, slithering noise followed by a low, guttural growl. It's the sound of something waking up, something that hasn't eaten in a very long time. Panicked, Alicia scrambles to her feet and begins to run. She doesn't know where she's going. She just knows she has to get away from that sound. She sprints deeper into the labyrinth, her footsteps echoing like drumbeats in the narrow halls. She reaches a massive set of double doors that groan as they swing open. Behind them is a large chamber, but it's not empty. In the center of the room, a dark, pulsing mass of flesh and shadow sits. As Alicia watches, frozen in horror, a giant, singular eye opens within the mass. It's a milky, lidless orb that fixes onto her with a terrifying, predatory focus. The air in the room becomes thick with the scent of rot and old magic. The mass begins to uncoil, revealing a grotesque, multi-eyed monster that towers over her. It has too many limbs, each one ending in a jagged claw, and its body is covered in mouths that all seem to be whispering at once. Alicia is paralyzed, her legs feeling like lead. She tries to lift her staff, but her hands are shaking too hard. She's staring into the face of a true nightmare, a boss from the depths of the demon continent's history. Back at the surface, Lobelia wakes up and immediately notices the empty spot by the fire. He doesn't panic, he just sighs. He tracks her footprints across the sand until they disappear into the hole. He deduces instantly that the labyrinth's master must have used a lure to draw her inside. He looks down into the darkness, his expression one of pure annoyance. "What a troublesome woman," he mutters, but there's no hesitation in his movements as he prepares to follow. He recalls his past life, remembering that he grinded this place several times back when this world was just a game. He knows every trap, every shortcut, and every monster. With a confident smirk, he leaps into the hole, his dark cloak billowing out behind him like the wings of a crow. He's not going in to explore, he's going in to clear the dungeon, and he's aiming straight for the boss room where Alicia is likely being held. As he navigates the ruins, a group of lesser monsters, shadowy, skeletal things, lunge at him from the walls. Lobelia doesn't even slow down. He casts a powerful curse break spell, a wave of white-hot energy that vaporizes the monsters instantly. They don't even have time to scream before they're turned into ash. He moves through the labyrinth with the efficiency of a speedrunner, his mind already 3 steps ahead of the dungeon's design. He punches through stone walls and bypasses intricate puzzles with a wave of his hand, following the path he remembers by heart. He can hear the distant sounds of combat, or rather, the sounds of a one-sided hunt. He knows he has to hurry. The boss of this labyrinth isn't something Alicia can handle on her own, especially in her current emotional state. He rounds a final corner, the massive doors of the boss chamber looming ahead of him. Lobelia kicks the main doors open with a thunderous crash. Inside, he sees the multi-eyed monster holding a captured, struggling Alicia in one of its massive, slimy claws. She looks small and fragile against the beast, her staff broken on the floor. The monster is pulling her toward its central mouth, its many eyes blinking in anticipation of a feast. Lobelia stands in the doorway, the light from his grimoire casting long, jagged shadows against the walls. As the monster prepares to take a bite, Lobelia intervenes. "I told you, you're a troublesome woman," he calls out, his voice echoing through the chamber. He unleashes a void slash, a blade of pure nothingness that shears through the monster's arm like it's made of paper. Alicia is dropped, falling through the air, but Lobelia is already there. He catches her with one arm, his other hand already beginning to glow with a terrifying, crackling energy. He doesn't give the monster a chance to recover. He summons a massive bolt of deadly thunder, a jagged spear of purple lightning that strikes the creature right in its central eye. The roar of the thunder is deafening, and the light is so bright it turns the chamber white. The monster is completely incinerated, its grotesque body dissolving into a cloud of foul-smelling smoke. Lobelia stands in the middle of the carnage, holding a trembling Alicia, the absolute master of the room. Alicia can barely speak, her voice a series of choked-back sobs as she apologizes to him. She realized she was wrong to run, wrong to doubt the man who had already saved her life once. But Lobelia isn't listening to her apologies. He's already preparing another spell, his eyes fixed on the shadows at the back of the room. He summons a black spear of mana, the air around it vibrating with destructive potential. He's not done clearing the room yet. He unleashes the Annihilation Spear, a one-hit kill spell that is as beautiful as it is terrifying. It's a beam of solid darkness that travels through the air, erasing everything in its path. It hits the remaining core of the monster, and the entire back wall of the chamber simply ceases to exist. The threat is gone, erased from reality by the sheer, overwhelming power of a man who refuses to let his heroine die in a hole. The high magic cost of the spell finally takes its toll. Lobelia staggers, his mana reserves momentarily depleted. Alicia, finding her strength, moves to support him, her small hands gripping his arm. He looks at her and tells her to forget her apologies for running away. He doesn't want her guilt. He wants her cooperation. He's tired, he's hungry, and he's still stuck in the middle of a desert, and he doesn't have time for a drama session. Lobelia clarifies his position once and for all. He has no intention of letting her die, but it's not out of the goodness of his heart. He tells her she's different from common fools, and that she needs to have some self-awareness of her own value. He's basically telling her she's too important to be this stupid. It's a classic Lobelia compliment, wrapped in an insult and delivered with a scowl, but to Alicia, it's the most reassuring thing she's ever heard. Alicia thanks him, her voice finally steady. She agrees to stop using formal honorifics, a small but significant shift in their relationship. They are no longer just a captor and a prisoner, or even just travelers. They are allies. Lobelia then announces their next destination, the town of Arcadia. He says it with a certain grim determination, as if he knows that their arrival there is going to be the start of a whole new set of problems. He explains that Arcadia is a refugee town, a place supposedly managed by the hero Reinhard. But according to his knowledge of the game's scenario, the town has fallen into extreme poverty. It's a place of broken promises and forgotten people, a miracle that turned into a nightmare. He wants to see it for himself, to see how the justice of the hero has actually affected the people on the ground. It's a chance to see the real-world Reinhard left behind. They reach the fortified gates of Arcadia after days of travel. The walls are high and topped with jagged metal, looking more like a prison than a sanctuary. As they approach, the air is suddenly sliced by a whistling sound. An arrow thuds into the ground inches from Lobelia's boot. They are being targeted by archers on the walls, who look down at them with suspicion and fear. Even in a town of refugees, newcomers are treated like invaders. Lobelia tells Alicia to play along with a plan. He instructs her to act like a helpless, starving refugee. She puts on a performance of a lifetime, her eyes welling with tears as she begs for entry, claiming they are homeless war refugees with nowhere else to go. It's a classic piece of deception, and it works. The guards, seeing a beautiful, crying girl and a bedraggled man, finally lower their bows and signal for the gates to be opened. A man in worn-out armor welcomes them inside, but the sight that greets them is heartbreaking. Alicia is visibly shocked. The residents are living in hovels, their faces hollow and their eyes glazed with the sickness of long-term hunger. This is Arcadia, the town Reinhard was supposed to be protecting. It's a graveyard for the living, a place where hope has been replaced by a slow, grinding misery. The hero's management has been a catastrophic failure. They find a small, abandoned corner to rest. While Lobelia begins to cook a modest meal over a small portable stove, he reflects on the situation. Arcadia was used to deceive the public, a shining example of the hero's charity that hit a dark, rotting core. He notes to himself that Reinhard is likely unaware of the true extent of the suffering here, his subordinates probably filtering the news to keep their leader's conscience clean. The ignorance of the hero is the tragedy of the people. The smell of Lobelia's cooking, something simple but hearty, fills the small space. Alicia takes a bite and finds it exceptionally delicious, her eyes widening in surprise. She didn't expect the villain to be a gourmet chef. But the peaceful meal is interrupted. Alicia notices a pair of eyes watching them from the shadows of a nearby alleyway. Then another pair. There are children watching them, their small faces pinched with a hunger that no one should ever have to know. 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, stare longingly through the broken window of their shelter. They look like skeletons covered in skin, their clothes little more than rags. Lobelia looks at them, then at his plate. Without a word, he gestures for them to come inside. The scene shifts to the 3 children ravenously eating the food shared by Lobelia and Alicia, their small hands shaking as they shove the warm meal into their mouths. It's a silent, heavy moment of charity. The children introduced themselves as Rue, Jessica, and Ars. They explained that the aid ships from the kingdom stopped arriving months ago, and they've been forgotten by the world. Lobelia listens, his face a mask of cold fury. He asks them what they think of the hero, the man whose name is on the gates of this town. He wants to hear the truth from the people who have to live with the consequences of Reinhardt's justice. The response is immediate and visceral. The children denounce the hero as scum and a hypocrite. To them, Reinhardt is just a name on a poster, a man who lives in a palace while they starve in the dirt. Lobelia nods, a dark light in his eyes. He offers to teach them the strength they need to survive. He won't give them a hero's speech. He will give them the tools to fight back against a world that has abandoned them. The children's eyes light up with a desperate, fierce enthusiasm. They accept his offer instantly, seeing in Lobelia a kind of power they can actually understand. As he prepares to go out on a patrol to find more resources, Alicia watches him with a worried expression. She's starting to see that Lobelia isn't just surviving. He's starting a revolution, and she's not sure where it will end, but she knows she can't turn back now. Lobelia heads out into the snowy outskirts of the town, his boots crunching on the frozen ground. He's looking for easy prey, monsters that can be harvested for meat to feed the starving town. It's his way of saying thank you to the children, and perhaps a way to vent his own mounting frustration. But as he rounds a snowy ridge, the ground begins to shake. Something massive is approaching, its heavy footsteps echoing like thunder through the mountain pass. A massive boar, the size of a small house and covered in thick, matted fur, bursts through the trees. Its tusks are like ivory spears, and its eyes are red with primal rage. Lobelia doesn't look afraid. He looks excited. "Jackpot!" he exclaims, a wide, predatory grin spreading across his face. He opens his grimoire, the pages fluttering in the frigid wind, and begins to cast jet black spear. He's not just hunting, he's providing, and he's going to enjoy every second of the kill. The spears of darkness pierce the giant boar's hide with ease, killing it instantly. The massive beast skids across the snow, coming to a halt at Lobelia's feet. He walks up to the carcass, happily preparing to harvest the meat. But as he reaches out, his book suddenly emits a blinding, unexpected flash of light. It's not a spell he cast. The grimoire is reacting to something, its sentient pages vibrating with a power that Lobelia hasn't seen before. He's caught completely by surprise. A dark explosion of mana erupts from the book, the force of it knocking the snow from the surrounding trees. A deep, resonant laugh echoes through the valley, a sound that feels like it's coming from the very earth itself. A horned man manifests from the shadows, his presence so imposing that the air itself seems to thicken. He bows deeply before the stunned Lobelia, his voice smooth as silk. "Dragon King Boros, at your service." And just like that, the most hated villain has gained an ally that could turn the entire world into his playground.